Why, hello there, everyone. Welcome to my Invincible versus closed alpha test gameplay impressions video. The alpha test ended earlier today, but we still have access to the training mode. So that is what I will be using to demonstrate some of the things I wish to talk about. Those things being things in regard to the design philosophy of the game itself, rather than things such as very obvious bugs and glitches that will definitely get sorted out, or at the very least, bugs and glitches that the devs have already definitely noticed and will attempt to address, right? I would rather save my breath for things which may or may not change. First of all, I am very happy to report that the game is mad fun. It's doing a lot of things right, and it's doing a lot of things to appeal to my taste specifically. But with it being an alpha test, expectedly, I do have some critiques. So a little context before I get to some of the more pressing ones is that this game has two control schemes. It has a motion mode and a standard mode, the standard mode being the default control scheme. So the developers originally made this game to not have motion inputs. That's what the standard mode is. And apparently enough people were complaining in focus tests and whatnot that the game had way too many buttons and button combinations. So they added the motion input scheme as a way to shorten or shrink the amount of buttons, right? That is one of the several benefits of having motion inputs in a game, is that you can do more with less, right? You can have more moves with less buttons necessary to do those moves, right? And if you play on motion input mode, every character in the game, or at least every character so far, every character that is playable as of this alpha test, each one has a quarter circle forward special move, a quarter circle back special move, and a DP forward special move, okay? And as you would imagine, even though I do appreciate that they added this motion input mode for the people who don't like having this many buttons, it is quite apparent that once you get used to the amount of buttons in standard mode, the standard mode is going to be, competitively speaking, objectively better than motion, right? Because once you get used to the amount of buttons, it's not going to be an issue anymore, or at least it shouldn't be an issue once you get used to it. And then, if you're playing on motion inputs and you're fighting somebody on standard, your special moves, no matter what, even if you are really fast at inputting special moves, your special moves will take longer to come out than somebody on standard, right? So standard, when optimized, versus motion inputs, when optimized, standard is going to be objectively better. So even though I do appreciate that motion inputs are here, I look at it as more of a training wheels mode for people like myself, because even though if this game were out right now, if it were out for real, I would just force myself to learn standard, right? Because it's objectively, competitively better, and I would want to teach myself the objectively better thing, right? But because this alpha test was only 1 weekend long, I knew that it would take me way too long to get used to all of these buttons and different button combinations as is. So I decided to play on motion just so that way I could start playing the game faster and start doing things that I wanted to do faster, which is really ironic, right? Because if you think of a game like Street Fighter 6, the whole point of them adding a control scheme in which you could do special moves without motion inputs, that control scheme was made to act as a training wheels mode to get beginners into the game. Whereas in my case, I think the motion inputs mode is much more of the training wheels, because I'm able to start playing without having to memorize all these different buttons and button combinations. But if I were to get into the game for real, I would have to switch to standard so I could start doing special moves faster. So it's a little backwards in that way, and I would like for them to add some kind of incentive to make motion inputs better, maybe, but I can understand why they wouldn't, because the game was created to be played on standard first and foremost, right? And motion inputs were kind of added later on as a compensation thing. But at the very least, even if the motion input mode ends up being nothing more than a novelty in this game, I do appreciate its inclusion, so that way it can serve to demonstrate one of the benefits of why motion inputs exist in the first place, right? Because even if motion inputs end up being never used, there is definitive proof in this game that you can make a much more simple control scheme with the innovation that is motion inputs, right? But even if the special moves in the motion input mode remain the same damage as standard, I do think that there are other ways to close the gap between the two and make the motion input mode at least closer in viability to the standard mode than it exists right now. The main change being that instead of having a quarter circle forward, a quarter circle back, and a forward DP, I think that the DP motion, instead of being a traditional DP motion, it could be down, down. And Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite does this as well, at least for some of the characters, such as Morrigan, if I'm remembering correctly. Morrigan has a down, down DP in that game, and it works just fine. My point is that if you change the DP inputs to be down, down instead of 6, 2, 3, yes, they will still be technically and always slower than a one-button DP, but they will still be much closer in speed to a one-button DP than if you were to have to input 6, 2, 3 every time. And honestly, as somebody that played the whole closed alpha on the motion inputs mode, I was definitely much more hesitant to use my DP specials than some of my opponents who are playing on standard, because naturally, if I am going to do a DP, I have much more to consider, right? I have much more to lose because I have to always quickly identify if I'm in a situation in which I have the time to input the whole thing. Whereas my opponents, who are mostly playing on standard, they could just press the button without having to consider that risk, right? So I did notice that I wasn't able to take full advantage of my character's movesets as much as some of my opponents, just because that one DP input, the DP moves for the characters I was playing, was definitely something that I couldn't use as much as I should be using, right? I could tell that my DP moves were definitely meant to be used more than what I was able to do, and it was solely because of that 623 input, which is preventing me from using it as much as I should. Another big reason why the DP inputs should be a down-down motion, if you want to even call that a motion input, is that it is incredibly easy to accidentally get a DP in the air instead of a quarter circle move in the air if you are doing it after a forward jump, okay? And this is because when you do a forward jump, you're having to press up and forward, right? And the game remembers that forward input for so long that you have to wait a significant amount of time before you input a quarter circle before the game forgets the forward, so it can actually give you the quarter circle move instead of a DP, right? So for example, Monster Girl's quarter circle special on the ground is this punch walk move, right? But in the air, it is this effectively a dive kick move, right? Even though she's using her knees. And so you can imagine that there were several instances in which I would want to do that close to the ground after doing a forward jump, right? But if you do the forward jump, look at that. That's her DP, right? So I got it there because I waited long enough. And not only do you have to wait long enough, it requires you to press the forward in your forward jump so briefly because you have to let go of it as quickly as possible so the game can forget it sooner, right? Like that. But if I'm holding up forward for just a little bit too long and then I do my quarter circle, I'm going to get a DP in the air by accident like that. And that would happen so often, right? And that was definitely a source of frustration. Yeah, technically, if you get good enough, you can press the forward so briefly that you could do it that low to the ground. But even so, it means that there's going to be a limit to how low you can actually do a quarter circle move. Whereas if you're playing on standard, you can do the quarter circle move as low to the ground as you want, right? Or at least much lower to the ground than if you were playing on motion. So that's another objective disadvantage that you have when playing on the motion scheme that could be easily fixed by changing the DP inputs into a down-down motion. Speaking of jumps, my next critique, which is also something very easily fixable, is in regard to the tri-dashes in this game. So in this game, some characters have tri-dashes, some characters don't. On my team, Mark and Omni-Man, they both have a tri-dash. If you don't know what a tri-dash is, it's something that some air dashers have. So normally, a regular air dash is going to be like this, right? You air dash horizontally forward or backwards, right? A tri-dash is when you can air dash at a downward diagonal, right? At a 45-degree angle like this. And what makes it so good, if you play Marvel vs. Capcom, especially if you play Magneto, or if you've had a run-in with Magneto, you should be intimately familiar with this. What makes tri-dashing so good is that it lets you do, at least in other games, it lets you do an air button very quickly against your opponent, right? So you should be able to do it like that and hit them. So it'll be an overhead that's hard to react to, right? But in this game, as you just saw, even though I did a tri-dash and I hit my light button during the tri-dash, it didn't come out in time. And that's the issue in this game. If you want to have a button come out from a tri-dash, the only way to really get it to work is that you have to start the tri-dash from the apex of your jump. Like that. That's the only real way you're going to get an attack from a tri-dash. But that defeats the point of a tri-dash, right? Because if I'm only able to hit an opponent during a tri-dash from the apex of my jump, man, even that wasn't good enough. If I have to do it from the apex of my jump, like that, it's going to be so reactable because I'm starting the tri-dash from way up here. And like I said, that defeats the point of a tri-dash because the whole point of attacking from a tri-dash is that it's hard to react to. I don't know why this would be the case in this game. Maybe the devs thought that tri-dashing into the opponent with an overhead would be too cheap, but I don't know why they would think that when this game already has cheap stuff, and this game already has ambiguous high-low mix when you use assists, because there are overhead assists in this game, and you can use that in conjunction with your controlled character's lows and make some super ambiguous mix-ups. And that is at least as cheap as a tri-dash, right? So I don't know why that would be the case. If you're going to have characters with the ability to do this sort of air dashing, this sort of 45-degree angle air dashing, then they should be able to take advantage of it somehow. And right now, you can't really take advantage of that. So that seems like an absolute waste on these characters. So they should make it where you can do these buttons sooner out of a tri-dash. And my final critique about the game in general is back to this menu, back to the controller mapping menu. For some reason in this game, although they give you options to bind several button combinations as a macro, they don't give you the option to macro the combo breaker. And I don't know why. I don't know why that in particular would be something that doesn't have a macro. If you look at the move list, you can see that assist breaker, which is the general combo breaker in this game, it's done with dash and assist, at least on the motion scheme. But whether you're playing on motion or standard, they still don't give you an option to macro it. And this was a big issue for me because I think that if I were able to macro the assist breaker, I could have created a button layout that would be doable for me on standard. But because I couldn't get the assist breaker, it was impossible for me to get a button layout on standard that didn't require me to do some crazy finger gymnastics. And that's why I ended up opting for motion inputs during this closed alpha, right? I imagine it's probably not as big of a deal on pad, but if you're playing on leverless or stick, it's definitely kind of a puzzle trying to figure out a good button layout that works for you, and them adding a macro for the assist breaker would definitely make it easier to find a control scheme that works on standard. You're going to have to do some crazy finger gymnastics either way on standard, just because this game on standard uses so many buttons and different button combinations, but it would make it better. And that concludes my general critiques about the game. So now I would like to mention some character-specific stuff. On the first day of the alpha test, my team was Mark, Battle Beast, and Monster Girl. But I ended up swapping Battle Beast for Omni-Man because I ended up not liking Battle Beast as much as I thought I would. He was okay, but between Battle Beast and Monster Girl is a much better big body archetype. She fulfills the big body archetype in a much more satisfying way. She definitely fulfills the power fantasy of a big body super armor character much better, even though both Battle Beast and Monster Girl are both supposed to be big super armor type characters, right? And I think maybe this is because when I was playing Battle Beast, at least, maybe some other people got better value out of him if they were playing him better. But when I was playing Battle Beast, a lot of his moves are multi-hitting moves, and oftentimes I would hit with the first hit. The first hit of the multi-hit attack would connect with the opponent, but then the opponent would fall out, and then the rest of the hits would whiff. And that would happen very often when I was playing Battle Beast. And that led to playing him feeling not very satisfactory, right? Maybe I just need to get better at using him. Maybe he's not as pick up and play as a character like Monster Girl, but that's why I ended up swapping him. And I would like to mention that my character-specific critiques, such as that, it's not in regard to character balance. Right now, I'm not talking about character balance at all, because character balance can always be fixed later. The game can always be patched to address character balance, and inevitably, characters are going to be unbalanced at launch anyway, so that's not what I'm concerned with. I'm talking about the characters from a fun factor perspective, right? And in terms of the fun, Battle Beast was not as fun compared to Monster Girl to me. Omni-Man is crazy though, and I immediately was having fun with him when I put him on the team, which is why he stayed over Battle Beast. As for Mark, he is really fun as well. I really like how fast he can get in, and I really like how well he can stick to an opponent. But my one critique with Mark's moveset, and again, this isn't about character viability. I'm not saying that he isn't viable enough. In fact, I think Mark is actually pretty good in this game. I'm just talking about from a satisfaction fun factor. His air down medium. I think his air down medium should be a little easier to combo off of, because it is a cross-up move. I could actually line this up to demonstrate it. See, it is a cross-up move, but it has a very narrow hitbox, so it's not the easiest thing in the world to land in a real match. So I think it should be easier to combo off of. Right there, that was a combo. So when I'm doing it in training mode, it doesn't seem that bad, right? But whenever you go for this in a real match, it's hard to have a good level of confidence that it's actually going to hit. So I think you should have a little bit more time to hit confirm this. See right there? See right there? That wasn't able to connect. I think that should connect, because like I said, it's so rare to actually land that move in a match. And not only is it rare to land the move, because of how narrow it is, it's actually incredibly hard to line it up against a moving opponent to specifically be on one side or the other. Most of the time when I'm going for this move, even though I'm attempting to cross up my opponent, I'm also sort of crossing up myself, because when I'm over an opponent and I'm lining this up in an ambiguous spot, it's hard for even me to tell which side it's going to land on, right? So I think because it's hard enough to land and because the hitbox is narrow enough, I think that the hit stun could be a little bit longer to allow somebody to hit confirm that just a little bit easier. That's my one critique about Mark's moveset. And lastly, one final critique, using Monster Girl as an example here. She has a lot of moves that look like command grabs, right? And I think they look great and they're satisfying to land. But I wish that at least one character in this game had at least one actual command grab move. Because even though Monster Girl has several moves that look like command grabs, none of them are actual unblockable grabs. They're all hit grabs. Omni-Man has some moves like that as well. So does Battle Beast. And so I wish that at least one of them was a real command grab. You don't have to take this point too seriously because maybe my brain is just too poisoned from maining grapplers in other games. But I think that at least with a character like Monster Girl, you could make some kind of exception and break the rule in this game and allow her to have one command grab at least, right? Considering she has so many moves that look like command grabs. I can kind of understand why the devs might not want there to be unblockable command grabs in this game because the regular throw in this game is already super strong. In fact, I really like that the back throw in this game, the universal back throw, is like a Sam Show grab because instead of it doing damage like a forward throw like that, instead of it just being this pre-baked animation that does a little bit of damage, the back throw repositions the opponent and sets them up for a full combo, which I think is really cool to have in a tag team game instead of it just being relegated to Sam Show. I think that's really cool. So maybe because you can already get full combos from regular throws, they felt that there was no need to have command grab specials in this game. But still, I would love for a move like this to actually be unblockable. It doesn't even have to be that great. I just want to be able to unblockable somebody with a grab that can't be teched. That's just me, though, me personally. Again, you don't have to take that one too seriously. Keep in mind that's coming from a grappler main. But anyway, those are all of my critiques I felt worth mentioning. Anything else would be nitpicky, I think, so I would rather just keep the video relegated to the critiques I most wanted to mention about things that I most want to change. I really like this game. It's a ton of fun. I'm very much looking forward to the release. I'm planning on streaming this game a bunch when it comes out. I'm also looking forward to the next playtest if there is going to be one. And I'm also really looking forward to whatever characters get revealed for this game, because now that I have firsthand experience playing the game, I'm going to have much better perspective watching the new character reveal trailers, right? And being able to analyze their moves now that I know what would make a move good in this game and what would make a move not so good. So if you guys got to play the alpha test as well, let me know what you think in the comments, or if you were not able to get in, let me know if you have any questions about the game and I will try to answer them. So thanks everyone for watching, and I will see all of you guys later. Bye for now.